Hello guys, welcome back. In this video, let's explore the Micropoly, which is in the Dynamic Subdivision menu. We also explore all the Dynamic Subdivision related settings here to get more control over it. Dynamic Subdivision is an alternate way to subdivide the mesh. It not only subdivides the mesh, it also makes it smooth and round. So if you open the geometry sub palette here, in that you have the divide option, which is a very conventional way of dividing your model. And the number of times you keep hitting this, it becomes more round. So if I just undo it and then come to the Dynamic Subdivision, it also does very similar. Okay, so here we have the smooth subdivisions. Okay, like I have the value of 0, which has no subdivision. We have subdivision 1, we have subdivision 2, and so on. This is actually virtually doing this smoothness here. It is not actually subdividing the model like what we are having in the normal geometry divisions. And what's the advantage with this dynamic subdivision is, let's say if I apply a smooth subdivision here, okay, and then if I use any any tools like IMM brush maybe, and then when I just click and drag it, you could see the result can be, the result is applied onto the model, which is not possible when I divide it with a normal subdivision. So when I apply this model onto this, you get an error message that this has got multiple subdivisions. You either freeze it or remove the subdivisions here. So the major difference between the normal division and dynamic subdivision is that you can apply a lot of tools which doesn't work with the normal division method. So here we got the dynamic subdivision, and the subdivision amount can be controlled here. Okay, the number of smooth what we have. The ZModeler will work interactively onto this model. I can select the ZModeler, and then you could able to see the faces. I can select maybe a extrude and then single poly, and then when I extrude it, it starts working with that. Okay, so that is something really interesting about this dynamic subdivision. Once I've done this dynamic subdivision, you can maybe disable and enable at any point of time. And what you're seeing is the vertex point of the previous or the base mesh, and the after smooth where that vertex has gone is what you are able to see here. You can select that point and start modeling or tweaking the mesh as per the requirement there. Okay, so if I apply it, the dynamic subdivision is applied here, and then it has transferred that into the normal division. As you could see, you got that in here. So I'll just undo it again and then bring back my dynamic subdivision there. So you have the subdivisions of 1, which is the default one there. Okay, let me put the value of 0 and see what happens here. We have this option called QGrid. So we have QGrid, which is actually going to divide the mesh into, every polygon is divided into 4 polygons here. Okay, there are different types of subdivisions which happen in this dynamic subdivision tool. One is your conventional smooth subdivision, which works on Catmull-Clark subdivision method. But this is more like it divides the mesh, and then in conjunction with the bevel, it works there. What if I start using the smooth as well? Okay, it's adding more polygons, it's making more sharper, as you could see. This is the smooth what I've got at the subdivision 2, and then I'm starting this grid, it's making it hard. So let's keep that thing away. So you have the QGrid. One is the value 0, there's nothing happening here, and then when I'm putting the value of 1 here, so what's really happening with that? So let's check that. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to select the sub tool and then duplicate that, and the second sub tool, let's select that, and then select the move tool, and then I'll go to the geometry section there and then put the QGrid to a value of 2. Okay, and what I'm going to do is I will apply this, and then for this also I'm going to apply this. This is the QGrid, and this is the QGrid, and the major difference is the number of line segments between these two models. You could see this model has divided it second time, and this is divided in to the first time here. Okay, so let me just select this one and undo it, and then go to the sub tool and then delete the previous one. Okay, just delete that, not required. So let me check the dynamic subdivision and then start putting the grid value here of 1, and then we have an option called coverage. Now you could able to see that coverage is sort of making it giving a bigger bevel width here. Okay, and then apart from the bevel, you've got the chamfer. Chamfer looks more a rounded mesh, whereas the bevel looks very chiseled one. And the best part is you can use this in a conjunction, the bevel and chamfer. Constant is defaultly on here. Let me just increase the QGrid value to 3 or maybe 5, and you should be able to see the model is getting more lines in the edges here. Okay, so if I just apply it, and you should be able to see that lines here, whereas when I put the QGrid value of 1, and then you see the value is really less there, and the bevel radius is controlled by the coverage value there. And when I'm using this QGrid, maybe around 4 or 5, and then when I enable the constant, it actually tries to keep that model, with uniform spaced polygons. So it's like slightly refines the mesh in terms of the size of the polygon is concerned. So that's one thing you could check. I'll use this in a combination, and that is the smooth value is put to 1, and then you have the grid here. Okay, so with smooth value 0, you could clearly see the overall grid building is happening on the corners only. Okay, so I'll put a value of 1 in the smoothness, and then we have this option called flat subdivision. Again, this divides the mesh. Okay, now let's say if there is no QGrid, which is dividing the mesh only for the purpose of bevel and chamfer, which you could see there on the corner, and then you got the flat subdivision, which is going to divide the existing polygons. Now, whatever the result we have achieved with the smooth subdivision and the QGrid, it keeps that and it divides that mesh without affecting the roundness of it. So if I start putting more values here, and then when I apply it, and then you should be able to see that model from this line to this line, there are so many lines, but it's not affecting the roundness. It's just dividing. It's not doing anything after the division is added. That's the flat subdivision. Okay, so let me put this back, and then put the QGrid value of maybe 5, and then start playing with the coverage, and then when I divide it, it adds the lines without affecting the model. Okay, so that's flat subdivision for you. So I'll switch off the dynamic subdivision to check with the thickness value. So I'll be selecting the ZModeler. Okay, and then I will also switch off the active symmetry, and then select the face, and then delete that face. Okay, so it's deleted that face, and then I apply the dynamic subdivision. Let me put a value of 1 in the smooth. Don't want any flat subdivision. Increasing the coverage, all looks good. Now we have thickness here. Okay, so I'll put a value of 0.1, way too much, 0.01, and you should be able to see this has given the thickness to the model, which is 0.01, 0.005, that reduces that. Then we have the segments, which is adding more lines into that particular thickness there. Now the result what we have achieved in this area is not neat, and that is where you can play with the smoothness. Okay, it actually smooths the result when it comes to thickness is concerned. So wherever thickness is working, that area you get the smoothness affecting that. Okay, so that is very much related to the thickness there. So we have the post subdivision option, and you should be able to see the result of the thickness is not satisfactory. I mean, it's actually the smoothness what is applied is after the thickness, and it's not preserving that sharp crisp corners there. But when I enable the post subdivision, it gives that hard corners. Again, it works in conjunction with the thickness there. So we have this model here. It's a cylinder model. So I'll just apply dynamic subdivisions, and obviously you can just smooth that with all the settings what we have here. I just go to the Micropoly on, and then you should be able to see there's a texture sort of model placed. It's a model scattered or placed across the model. So this is a seamless model which you can build with any polygon tool here. So if I generally pick that, and you should be able to see that all polygons are replaced with this mesh here. You can choose any one of these models here, which can be used to maybe create the scale like pattern. This option has Micropoly has few options. One is fit. Fit makes the model fit in the polygon size, and weld option, if the model is seamless, then it sort of welds with each other. We have the scale option, which generally scales the model here. So I'll just put back the scale to 1 and align. Sometimes again it purely depends on the orientation of the faces. What is really important here is the rotation. If you could see, I'm just clicking this rotation, and then there is the model keep rotating in one particular axis there. You can do that in the other axis as well here. So you have a lot of options in this, which can allow you to add that cage like mesh. I see people struggle making in creating that speaker or microphone meshes. So Micropoly can actually make this job easier. However, I can just explore with the smooth subdivision, and then increase that value, and then based on the smoothness level, it adds more mesh to the overall model. So is it possible to use any custom mesh? So even the flat subdivision works, and the QGrid subdivision works, but QGrid is adding that lines around every polygon face, so it's giving that uniform meshes. You could able to see that, so QGrid should be avoided in that case. So how about using our own custom mesh? Just make sure that that mesh is here in the poly mesh category. So hold Control and click, and then pick any of the meshes what we have. So hold Control, click, and then choose that, and then you should able to see I've replaced all of them with the star model. Okay, so once that is done, you can go to the option called Apply, and then that becomes a Polymesh 3D, which is more dense. So whenever you're using any model for the Micropoly, one thing you should remember is this model what you're picking should be having low polygons, because high polygons when populated this much can completely make the file size heavier. And the next thing is when you are using any model, let's say if you want to use this model for Micropoly, make sure that it's a poly mesh first. Star is a default poly mesh, and then what you need to do is you need to make this model to the size of 1 unit. So for that, you can go to the deformation menu and click Unify button, which makes it to 1 unit size. Once that is done, you can use that to the Micropoly here. So these are few things you need to keep in mind when you're doing the Micropoly mesh here in the Dynamic Subdivision. Guys, I hope you like the video. I request you to like the video and subscribe the channel.
Okay.